Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. We have a familiar face joining us here today, Jacqui Fatka. Jacqui, welcome. Good to see you.
Great to see you too.
Oh, Jacqui, you may remember she was our policy editor for Feedstuffs for a number of years.
Yes. Yep.
And
Policy and grain and biofuels.
Yep. Now she's with the CoBank doing lead economist, farm supply, and biofuels. So doing all kinds of new exciting things. So great to see you. For those of you that are joining us here online, we want to thank you for taking the time to tune in as well. If you have any questions for Jacqui, feel free to post them there in the chat area on the right of your screen. If you're joining us from social media, post your questions directly in those channels. So Jacqui, we're going to talk about the sustainable aviation fuel credits. There's been a lot of discussion around those, both pro and con, or as you put it, the good, the bad, the unknown of the SAF tax guidance. But before we dig into that, I'd like you just to kind of give us an overview of these tax incentives, their purpose, kind of what they're all about. Just frame this up, if you would, please.
Yeah, so this actually goes back to the Inflation Reduction Act, which was one of the articles I remember researching and writing when I was on your staff at Feedstuffs. And in many ways, we didn't think that was going to go through, but a lot of climate focused policy in that Inflation Reduction Act, and some of those things are finally starting to go out and be implemented. So the big one right now is the 40B tax incentive, which helps to incentivize sustainable aviation fuel specifically, and that was for 2023 and 2024. But we just got the guidance for that just a couple of weeks ago for the 40B, which again, this is halfway through 2024, and this was for last year and this year. So some things in that, but that really everybody was watching to see what they did in the 40B to also set up another one called 45Z, which 45Z is more expansive than just the sustainable aviation fuel. It also allows all renewable fuels, so ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel. If it has a carbon intensity score reduction, then there's an ability to capture a higher tax incentive for that.
As we know, policy always moves fast. So the guidance recognizes that climate smart agricultural practices can reduce carbon emissions. So what should we know about that? Is that a good thing? Are there some challenges? Give us your perspective, if you would.
Yeah, so the really exciting thing is they really did finally admit that the actions that farmers are doing. So cover crops, a lot of your readers and listeners, manure management, cover crops are big, right? But this one didn't include all of them. This one requires a kind of check the box, right? So the check the box for corn is the cover crops, nitrogen stabilizers, and no-till or strip-till. So you have to use all three. You can't use just one. You can't manure management, like I mentioned. You don't get points for that. So the good here is that, yes, they're admitting that the practices that farmers do can reduce the carbon intensity score, can reduce the emissions that are on that farm, basically help give credit to that. The bad, they gave a 10-point deduction. So really, you could have had up to 30, 40, 50. I mean, all the different things that you can do, whether that's seed genetics, whether that's a nitrogen efficiency product, stabilizers is one thing, even the kind of cover crop you use can make a difference. So all those things, yay, they admitted that this is good, but this check the box is really not workable for some, right? So some areas of the country, cover crops aren't feasible. Other areas of the country, a stabilizer actually doesn't work well if you're using cover crops, right? So there's different things that are almost counterintuitive with each other too, with this check the box, and really doesn't give you the full CI score and value. And so that's part of this too. This 40B is just for sustainable aviation fuel, but this 45Z, you have to have a larger overall reduction or you don't get any credit. So if you're just going to get 5 points or 10 points and you need to have 25 to 50 point, you have to have an overall 50% reduction. So you may need to have a greater CI score production. And that's why we really need those unique values attributed to each practice that you're doing. So manure management, cover crops, each one of those is a single point value instead of just this check the box approach.
Any chance they'll go back and revisit that?
So I think that's what everybody's hoping here. This 40B is just for these 2 years, and we're already 18 months into it. So the value really is small, and there's very few people that are producing sustainable aviation fuel. So everyone is seeing this as this kind of opportunity to say, okay, that's okay, but we need more as we get the 45Z guidance, because we don't have 45Z guidance. So sustainable aviation fuel is included in 45Z, but there's other ways that the traditional biofuels might be able to participate in that space. And so that's everybody's talking points now. Yay! Thank you for recognizing that ag has a solution, but make sure we get the full value for it. So I think the next couple of months we're going to hear more and more of that, and then 45Z goes into effect in 2025. But again, does regulations go into effect on time, or will we see that actually, not have final guidance until later into the year next year?
Now, the tax incentives also offer sustainable aviation fuel producers premium opportunities and increases their ability to pay more for feedstocks. But what about farmers? Where are they in this whole scheme of things? And is there an opportunity to share in any of those premium incentives?
So right now, the sustainable aviation fuel producer is the one who gets that tax credit from the IRS. And then they're the ones who are going to pass that on to the farmer as they purchase those feedstocks. So, it could be as small as 20% of the tax credit. It could be as much as 80%. Obviously they're going to have to capture some of that value. I think a lot of farmers are hoping that they can get a 50% of that tax credit. But again, this comes down to the sustainable aviation fuel producer, which, there are a few. Georgia's got one right now. LanzaJet is one. There's another one called Montana Renewables that's got a plant up and running. But again, greatest value is if we can get enough of incentive for farmers to make those changes, right? We know that farmers are the ones who are taking on that cost, right? The sustainable aviation fuel provider isn't making any extra inputs based on this, right? But a farmer is. They need to make sure that the value is enough that helps them make that business case of, okay, I'm ready to do cover crops, or I'm ready to invest in this nitrogen stabilizer product, or I'm willing to not, to use strip till or no till. So there's got to be an economic incentive, or the farmers are not going to be able to make those business decisions to do it.
Right. It has to get down to that level. What about the data requirements associated with the SAF credits? Are they reasonable? Are they excessive? What's your thoughts on that?
So, just the last couple of weeks, there's been more reports about biofuel tax credit fraud. And that is one challenge that even the current system doesn't allow the IRS to not pay out a tax credit. They actually have to do it retroactively. So they have to pay it and then try to claw it back. This requires paperwork from farmers to prove what they are doing. And there are more companies who are coming into this space to provide that. The challenge, though, is that farmers are now maybe forced to work with some people that maybe they don't know or don't trust, right? So, so many of Feedstuff's readers are your grain cooperatives, even your ethanol producers. I think a lot of those entities are trusted by farmers. Farmers recognize that, when they deliver their corn, if they've got a CI score that goes with it, they can trust them that's going to stay where it needs to. But when we have all of these new companies coming in, these third-party verifiers, there is some reluctancy with farmers to move forward with them. And again, I think that's another challenge of this entire system, right? The system is based on the fact that we've got to have a verification that we're not greenwashing, right? We've got to be able to prove that if you did cover crops on your farm, or if you applied manure management, that you indeed did it in X way. But farmers have tons of this data. We have so much of it at our fingertips. And so again, how do you create a system that takes that data but doesn't do something that would harm the farmer as well, right? We've had so much discussion over the years of protecting that data in a way that doesn't, we're talking about nitrogen stabilizers, right? How much focus have we had in accusations at farmers for their nitrogens going down a river, into a river, or going down the Mississippi, especially, right? So, what happens if we are delivering corn saying that we are using a product, or that we have a certain amount that does maybe run off, and then they come back and they're liable for that? So there are some challenges within that too. Again, I would say I've heard some skepticism from farmers because of that data, especially with these new third parties that maybe they're not as familiar with.
You mentioned grain elevators. So where would they fall in this whole process? Because my understanding is the sale needs to be between the farmer and the SAF producer. So is there a role for them, or how is that going to work?
So again, this is for 40B, which 40B is just sustainable aviation fuel, and it's just 2023 and 2024. So yes, it really does kind of shut the door on grain cooperatives being able to participate. That being said, I think to get to the next level and to be able to really utilize 45Z in the full potential that Congress intended, I think they're going to need to write something in there that allows this to not just be a partnership between the farmer and the sustainable aviation fuel producer, which is how this is written. But I think, again, that's because of the uniqueness of 40B, but hopefully with 45Z, which is a broader scope of who could participate, they would allow this, that the grain cooperatives would be able to participate in that.
What about the stacking of voluntary carbon markets? Is there some limitations, or how might that work?
So right now, a lot of farmers are familiar with carbon offset markets, and some of them are participating. And this is one of my favorite stats. 93% of farmers know about carbon offset markets. 39% say this is way too confusing for me, and only 3% even participate. So in some ways, we have very low participation with carbon offset markets, but farmers are doing it, and farmers are starting to do some of those actions. The greater profit opportunity for farmers really comes not with a carbon offset, which I say an offset is when you sell your carbon of whatever you're doing on the farm and you're selling it to Microsoft. It's going off the farm. But the carbon inset is when you can start to capture that within your supply chain. So really great opportunity within the ethanol industry, especially, or the biofuels industry, to really target within your supply chain. And those focus that we're having, not just from companies, but all of these commitments that people are trying to make to promise that they're doing certain reductions, that's where the inset comes in. So I think that's actually a hindrance of further adoption with the 40B, but if they carry this forward in 45Z, if you can't use a carbon inset market, so say PepsiCo comes in, and PepsiCo is very active in the space of saying, hey, we want to have so many farmers doing regenerative ag, and we're going to pay you to do that. But then you can also get an extra bonus, stack that on top of it to get another CI. You're doing those actions. That CI score is benefited from what you're doing, and getting PepsiCo to come in and help you do that. And if you are going to limit that stacking ability, again, this has got to make sense for farmers. And they may need to have these different layered approaches to be able to say, hey, this is how we're going to be able to get a new revenue stream that really helps justify the cost of making these implementation on some of these conservation practices.
Reminder to post any questions you might have there in the chat or in your social media feed. So you got me talking farmers here, Jacqui. So as we wrap up, any final thoughts to leave our audience with today?
This is a unique opportunity, I think, again, and kind of building on some of that carbon inset. This 45Z is an opportunity for farmers to be able to hopefully get a new revenue stream. But the ethanol plants too are using another tax credit called 45Q, which is the carbon sequestration on their, a lot of them are looking for the pipeline to be able to pipe their carbon. Some of them are on a geological opportunity to be able to store it there on site, but those can be stacked. And so again, as you're looking for being able to accomplish major carbon emission reductions and sequestering carbon, there are some good opportunities. So again, hopefully the regulatory framework is written in a way that allows farmers to participate, allows the grain cooperatives to participate, to really reach these lofty goals, because that was the intent of what Inflation Reduction Act, what these tax incentives tried to do. So making the opportunity really work is what we're going to be watching forward. We got a little glimpse with 40B. We're going to see if they can make some changes with 45Z as we go into 2025. And hopefully, again, it's all about being able to make some new good changes for rural America.
So this will continue to evolve is what I'm hearing, and look at different options as we move forward. So thank you so much today, Jacqui, for joining us. Jacqui Fatka of CoBank.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
For those of you who tuned in, we appreciate you taking time with us as well. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 segments are available at feedstuffs.com. Until next time, for Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.